One mind, one fruit fly, one world, people. I just got done with a workout dinner session. Ready to go for part 8 here on the Epstein files dictation / Ghislaine Maxwell files. This is the Lonely Ronin, Adakin, the samurai without a master, the young Jedi. But before we start, I wanted to do something kind of fun. I saw this video of this teacher rapping Dr. Seuss, so I wanted to rap him too. So we'll just do a quick rap of Dr. Seuss. I'll wait for this beat to start. Waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or the mail to come, or the rain to go, or the phone to ring, or the snow to snow, or waiting around for a yes or a no, or waiting for their hair to grow. Everyone is just waiting. Waiting for the fish to bite, or waiting for wind to fly a kite, or waiting around for Friday night, or waiting perhaps for the Uncle Jake, or a pot to boil, or a better break, or a string of pearls, or a pair of pants, or a wig with curls, or another chance. Everyone is just waiting. It's a pretty interesting little rap that Dr. Seuss wrote, which I think is actually kind of applicable to right now. So without further ado, let's get into chapter 8. And this is Virginia Joffrey's writing, where she describes her first time being sexually trafficked. And this is her prose. We're on chapter 8. Where we left off before was she called TJ her junior high lover. So let's go ahead and start with chapter 8. Let me just pull up the documents. Oops. There we go. Okay. Chapter 8. Oh, I went back up to chapter 1 for some reason. Give me a moment here. The phone nearly rang out, and as I was about to hang up the receiver when he finally picked up. On the other end of the phone, I could hardly hear TJ above the background noises. When I asked where he was, he told me, "At our place, baby," meaning the apartment. The apartment Jeffrey had rented for me to be staying in alone. He already sounded off his chops, elongating his words and slurring his speech. There was music pumping and people shouting behind him, and everyone sounded like they were having a great time. I was so sick of his friends coming over, using my house as a place to party, and then trashing it so bad I would even have to sometimes throw my furniture out. I blew up at him over the phone and threatened to kick him out, back to his parents' house. So much for my relaxing evening. I thought to myself, venturing on to tell him, "You leech off me using the money I leave behind for you for drugs and throw these gigantic parties while I'm away." Also mentioning the disastrous message I would come home to. I'm so close to ending it with you. I would openly threaten, but he knew better than I did that I just couldn't bring myself to do so, eating some attachment to my youth through all of this. "Don't worry, baby," he would say, attempting to soothe me with his false words, going on to tell me how much he was missing me and how he was always thinking about me when I was away, which was like all the time. I would soon be buttered up and soft for serve. This was my penalty for choosing a guy that accepted my lifestyle with my other man, as I had so eloquently put it to him once. It's not only acceptable, but deemed it cool. The conversation ended with an easy goodbye and no "I love yous" or anything sweet. We weren't those kind of partners yet, so much time spent away from each other and the lifestyles we both led. I couldn't expect much more from him than what we already had. Jeffrey and I left 2 days later, heading off to Carmel in California for a business trip of his, leaving Ghislaine and Emmy to catch a commercial flight back to New York City, where we would meet up with them later. When we arrived at the hotel, we were given badges for the meeting tomorrow and settled into our rooms. We got adjoining rooms, keeping the doors open at all times, but sleeping in different beds. He liked sleeping alone. Even after our late night session, I would always go back to my own room. I think that's why he liked me so much. I never put pressure on him to become intimately more than what we were already, never giving him the impression I wanted more than what we had. It seemed to keep him happy just the way we were together. I hung out with Jeffrey that night, going to a restaurant for dinner, and afterwards watching a movie back at the hotel. The next morning, we went for an early morning breakfast before the conference, and Jeffrey gave me some money to go shopping instead of attending the all-day meeting with him. I was more than obliged to accept his request and wished him a good day before planning to meet back in the room around 6 p.m. He gave me $500. He said it was just enough to go have fun for the day, and the girl of my means could find plenty to do with that kind of money. I walked around the many boutiques that line the streets of the picturesque, cozy town, and picked up some bits of clothing here and there, and even met a girl who was passing through on a road trip. She was somewhere in her late teens with golden sunshine tresses, olive skin, and blue eyes. Her name escapes me, as it was so unexpected. I think it was Tin or something like that. But she was your typical California carefree chick, offering me a few tokes of her J as we ducked down a side street together. I was so happy I met this girl, as she was fun-spirited and charismatic, a relief from the social expectations I'd come to know lately. But always being on call, as I'd been trained up to be, I ended up inviting her back to meet Jeffrey at our hotel later as a surprise for him. Maybe she was just a bit too carefree for Jeffrey's taste, but anyhow, she was pretty enough to let him be the judge of that matter. Over the next hour of hanging out together, I found out that she was on a road trip with her best friend, who was still sleeping off the hard night of partying from the night before. She was originally from the southern states, as she had a bit of a drawl still left in her accent, and she had recently left her boyfriend because he was leaving for a college too far away, not believing in long-distance relationships. Then it was my turn to dish out my contribution to the conversation of getting to know each other. I always got anxiety before I would tell a girl what I did for work and romance as such. Morally, I was ashamed of who I was, especially with a girl having led somewhat of a normal life. Next, as always, I expected to be probed with so many more questions and having to make Jeffrey sound ideal and hot for the taste of a young girl, and knew I would be point blank lying. So I told her some of the truth, which was that he was really rich and paid good money for a massage, and useful to have around as a contact. I told her he'd give her $200 for a 2-hour massage, with me leading the way and warning her he was known to be frisky during the session. Unexpectedly, she said she could use the money, and then came the part that I hated the most, but had to do so they won't be as shocked as I was the first time I had met him. He does like us to be nude, though, and sometimes asks for more than just the massage itself. All I could do was wait for a response after a shocking sentence like that, and depending on the girl, most were sadly taken aback by the money. Her carefree attitude seemed to disillusion for a moment. When she gave it some thought and asked me, "He's not like fat and ugly, is he?" No, not at all," I replied. "He's got more of a Richard Gere appeal to him." Trying to make him sound a little more measurable than just a rich old man that just likes to be with girls younger than half his age. "Well then, what time shall we meet tonight?" she asked next. Great, I thought. Jeffrey will be most pleased with my find. Knock on my room quietly. You're going to be a surprise. Be there at around 7:30 tonight. and I will introduce you to Jeffrey. She threw the butt of the second J we shared into the bushes, and we strolled into a homemade fudge boutique to get some relief for the munchies we now had. When I got back to the hotel at around 5:45 p.m., as requested I'd be, nobody was back yet. So I took the time to set up the oils and bath in my room for his massage tonight. I thought I would plan it so the girl would be cleaning off, as Jeffrey liked before he had sexual contact with the new girl, and he could walk in and be surprised to find a strange, beautiful girl in my room who wanted to massage him. Jeffrey walked through the door not long after I was done prepping for the night ahead, looking like he had a rough day at the office, which was very rare for him. He sat down on the bed and I asked him how his day was. He didn't want to talk much about it, saying it was boring and long, rather asking what I got up to for the day. Being coy about having a J and his unexpected surprise to come, I told him it was a great day of shopping and sightseeing, and I even brought him back some local made fudge from the shop that had fulfilled my chocolate cravings only hours ago. Telling him of the places I ventured into, I mentioned to him we'd have to hit the Fisherman's Wharf tomorrow. I saw some locals walking around with bread baskets filled with creamy clam chowder and smelled absolutely scrumptious. He said if the weather were nice, we'd check it out tomorrow before we left for LA. He wanted to take off his jeans and collared shirt and put on his normal attire of sweatpants and a t-shirt. Sweatpants and a sweatshirt. Ushering him out the door for dinner when he was relaxed, I was lucky when he said that he was starving and quickly got dressed. We just found a quiet spot to eat that was next to the wharf and got back to the hotel just in time for our surprise guest. He wanted to go have a shower and settle down for a massage, so I told him I'd join him in a minute, trying not to let on about anything. The knock came quietly on my room's door just on time, as we had planned, and I told her my idea to surprise him. I led her into the bathroom where she orchestrated my plan perfectly. Jeffrey finished his shower without me, and when he called out for me, I told him that I needed him to have a look at something in my room real quick. Not giving into what it was that he would be looking at. He came into my room where I opened my bathroom door to reveal a beautiful nude girl bathing in a thick amount of soap bubbles in my tub, looking at him with an alluring intrigue. His grin went from ear to ear when she stood up and introduced herself, letting the bubbles run down her glistening body at an ever slow pace. It was a proud moment for Jeffrey. I had done well in his eyes, and she was not like the other girls I had brought to him before, degraded from a lifetime of abuse off the streets. This girl was exactly his pro quo, looking sweet and innocent as the girl next door. My efforts were to show him I knew that my only responsibility was to keep him happy at all costs. I led her through the massage on Jeffrey, and of course, afterwards, gratifying his perversion with his lustful requests to be fondled and watch us become more than just friends. I didn't feel too bad at the time with his coercion, providing many financial rewards, making his scheme enticing to a young, impressionable teen, not realizing the terrible memories left to come from all of this. Afterwards, he paid her the usual $200 he gave to everyone for their time, and took down her name and phone number, writing it in his infamous little black book of the contacts he met in every city, but only the ones he really liked made it down in his records. We went out the next afternoon, as I had suggested last night, and we ate our clam chowder bread baskets overlooking the wharf's bay, watching the seals playfully barking at each other on the rocks nearby. Shortly after, we were given to the private airstrip and took off for Los Angeles. On the plane, was an unexpected visitor. Matt Groening, the producer of The Simpsons TV show, was catching a ride with us. I was so excited, as I loved watching his show and acted like a starstruck fan, asking him everything from his initial idea for creating the show to where he got his characters from. He told me it was all based on his own family makeup, but without the crazy father and son scenes of Homer's hand around Bart's throat. I was enjoying our conversation when Jeffrey insisted that I give Matt a foot massage throughout the duration of the short flight. I never turned down a client, but when I saw the shape of his feet, I nearly threw up at the thought of having to touch them. He had yellow, crusty toenails that even someone with a chainsaw would have had trouble cutting through. And then there was the fluffy balls of leftover pieces of sock wedged between the crevices of his sweaty toes. Now that was the real icing on the cake for me. No way could I attempt this, I thought. Then I had an idea. I went to the back of the plane and rinsed a washcloth in warm, soapy water and returned for his dreaded foot massage, but not before attempting to clean them first. In return for my services, Matt was kind enough to draw me 2 quick sketches on blank paper from his briefcase of 2 of my favorite characters, Homer and Bart. I asked if he would make them out to my little brother and dad, the true fans of the family, not missing an episode during dinner over the past 10 years or so. Next to the A4 size drawing, he was able to fit in the quote, "To my greatest fan, from Matt Groening," and their names next to it. I knew they'd absolutely love it, and it was such a nice gesture next to it. And it was such a nice gesture, his feet were no longer an issue, as I laughed it off, and even made a joke to the comedian about getting a pedicure before hitting LA's beaches. The flight was only short, and we arrived in busy LA within the hour, saying goodbye to Matt, who was a pleasure to meet. Jeffrey had a meeting at a production studio for one of the girls he was keeping lured in his grasps. So we were off yet again for more business. We were staying with one of his old girlfriends. Jeffrey's code for "she got too old for my taste," but was still nice enough to keep around. She was a tall blonde with blue eyes, a stereotypical Barbie doll. In her younger years, she had been a successful model and now lived on the beaches of Santa Monica with a sweeping view of the ocean's landscape as her backyard. The next morning, Jeffrey and I went out to breakfast. He said Sarah Keller? I thought it was Kellen. Would be joining us with another one of Jeffrey's girls I hadn't met yet. Her name was Nadia Bjorlin, and she was a Yugoslavian model turned aspiring actress with the help of Jeffrey, as he so proudly remarked at the table before they arrived shortly thereafter. She was a stunning brunette with olive skin tones and shocking blue eyes. By far one of the most beautiful girls I had ever met before. She and Sarah approached the table, shopping bags in hands already in the early hours of the day. They both pulled out the chair and showed us the new pair of Jimmy Choos they bought on the way here this morning, and excitedly asked for Jeffrey's opinion. He loved the doting attention and anyone who could make him feel important. We all went back to Sarah's apartment that Jeffrey rented for her on Malibu Beach. This was the first time Jeffrey came to visit, and then we got there, you could see why. It was a tiny 1-bedroom shack, too small for his likes of accommodation, but she loved it, and it was plain to see why. The waves lapped underneath her porch twice a day. What else could anyone want? Before even walking through her door, you could hear the commotion of excitedly screaming females' voices coming from inside. There were about 5 other girls in Sarah's living room, and she had invited them so Jeffrey could have a few different girls to choose from. Jeffrey looked at Sarah and smiled. "Aren't you sweet?" As all the girls rushed to introduce themselves, hoping for the opportunities Sarah had offered them to come in the first place. We all had some coffee and biscuits while the conversation kept getting louder and louder. every girl trying to talk over the next one. Jeffrey could handle only so much of that before getting too annoyed. Excuse me. Instead of choosing one of the other new girls, Jeffrey wanted Sarah to show Nadia and I into her bedroom. He was anticipating the introduction of his two favorite girls together. What mischief he had hoped we would get up to was apparent when he asked where Sarah had kept her play toys and not the Fisher-Price ones. Sarah brought out quite a collection of her personal toys and was giggling on her way out as she shut the door. Suddenly, the room behind us went quiet, probably hoping to catch a moan or groans to laugh, and I felt so degraded having everyone knowing exactly what was going on. Knowing my duties well, I was baffled this time as there was no ritualistic massage wanted. He immediately instructed us to start kissing and fondling each other with the provided toys straight away. Seeing his excitement grow, watching us try and outdo one another with pleasure, he couldn't keep restraint any longer and started to have intercourse with the both of us, taking his erect penis out of the other to only swap to the other girl, back and forth. This continued for a good... Sorry. Okay, I need a sip. I just gotta... This is too much. Okay, I'm professional. It continued for a good 15 minutes or so while we continued to engage in lesbian acts on each other while the other girl was being subdued by Jeffrey's thrusts of penetration. Nadia was just as dutiful as I was in fulfilling his demented requests, willing to lend her body to Jeffrey and those he sent her to, for the sake those he sent her to, for the sake of keeping her acting career and putting on a good act at that. She was never competition, though. Once I found out where she actually came from, I took pity on her for the similar life of servitude we were both accustomed to. And not that we ever became good friends, but we had reason to relate to each other. Later on, Jeffrey, Nadia, and I went to a production studio in LA, where we had to meet with Nadia's agent as well as the producer of Days of Our Lives. The meeting lasted 5 minutes, with everyone in consent to the proposal. We flew all the way out there to talk about money, only to be leaving that evening back to New York City. On the way to the airport, we stopped at a 50s-looking diner and got a cheeseburger and vanilla milkshake. The first and only time I saw Jeffrey eat what I considered to be real food. 7 lanes to drive in, and the freeway was still lined bumper to bumper in the heavy rain. The sound of downpour on the rooftop of the taxi and the rhythm of the windshield wipers was making me sleepy. I was looking forward to sleeping through the long flight back. Thank goodness we had a private jet to catch back. The trip would be comfortable and not rush to get there on time through the daily peak hour traffic. Jeffrey asked me what I thought of Nadia. More of a kiss and tell kind of thing for him. So proud to admit some of his tenacious acts of pedophilia to me that I knew most people would be embarrassed to even think out loud. But I said what he wanted to hear when he asked me what I thought of her on the way back. I replied, "She's attractive, funny, and seems to know what she is doing with you." Laughing at my statement, he then started to tell me the history behind where he got her. 5 years ago, when she was merely a teenager, just turned 13. Her father had recently passed away, leaving Nadia's mother in a tremendous amount of debt and living in a third world country. She didn't have the means necessary to raise her own daughter. When Ghislaine approached Nadia for the first time in music school, she seemed like a maternal, caring stepmother, telling Nadia's mother if she let Nadia go with her, she would see to it personally that Nadia received the best education and chances in life to make it. In her customs, it wasn't odd for a young girl to be married off to bring the family good fortune. So she kissed her baby girl goodbye and sent her off to commence her life of servitude. I sat there speechless, listening to Jeffrey brag about his endeavor to get her over here, shocked that he could stoop as low to use a barely teen to oblige his sexual desires. He was laughing and giddy as he replayed the memories of her arrival over in his head, painting me a horrific picture I had no choice but to imitate a smile to face him with. No pretty girl is safe from the allurement of these villains procuring the youth off of every street in the world. I knew that day more than ever before, those morals did not exist for people like this. Jeffrey once told me that every girl he has had sexual relations with has benefited in their career, finances, or an achievement in marriage with a successful colleague of his. Mine was the massage career, ever so often still giving me a lesson from a professional, which kept me quiet for a while longer. I thought I was already knee-deep in this world. If I gave up after putting myself through all of this hell, it would have been for nothing. Sunk cost fallacy. So I treaded lightly, constantly at risk of being replaced by another willing participant in playing the eager student he wanted me to be. End of chapter 8. Take a quick sip. Chapter 9. We met Ghislaine and Emmy in New York City, and it wasn't a blissful reunion as I hoped for. Wanting a break from all of this, I was just looking forward to getting back to Palm Beach, not leaving for a further 4 more days. I got home late in the evening as Jeffrey invited me out to the movies after we had relaxed at his house for a while after landing. I put my keys through the door to my apartment and walked into a quiet house. Not thinking anyone was at home, I set my suitcase on the floor and put my cell phone on charge, as I always did, to be accessible for whenever Jeffrey or Ghislaine would call. I went to get a drink out of the fridge when I heard some noises coming from the back of my apartment where my bedroom was. I started back there and slowly turned my doorknob to reveal TJ on top of another girl. When they noticed they weren't alone anymore, TJ got off her with promptness. I recognized the girl from seeing her around at parties. She was the town Loie, scattering her trail of guys along with her presumable diseases, and I wasn't shy to verbalize when she tried to open a mouth and calm the heated situation between TJ and I. She didn't like her cards on the table in front of the guy she was screwing around with and got up in a fit of rage to attack me. Still nude with only my new white sheets to cover her body, I threw her out of my house along with TJ. I had been paying your way for months, only finding out you're sleeping with the biggest slut in Royal Palm Beach. At least have some dignity and higher your standards. I didn't really have a leg to stand on since I had started this relationship, giving him the knowledge I had a sugar daddy to answer to above him. You're gone all the time, and with that old man, what did you expect me to do? He was right, and I wanted what I couldn't have, but I needed some time to cool down and accept my situation. I loved having TJ around to come home to, and he was used to being my best friend in my school days. I convinced myself of the lies I continued to accept. Days later, I was still not speaking with TJ, mentally adjusting to my circumstances. I thought I'd have the day off to relax since I hadn't been called all day. Until about 5 p.m. when Ghislaine called and said Jeffrey would like a massage in an hour. Grudgingly, I got up from relaxing on the couch, got dressed, and put my makeup on, meeting Juan downstairs a half an hour later. Jeffrey was already lying on the massage table when I walked in. I started the massage being very quiet from my somber mood, and Jeffrey picked up on it and said, "You know, it's not good to massage people when you're angry. You could pass on negative energy." I wasn't sure if he was serious or just trying to be nice, so I could speak about what was bothering me. Ending up not being able to contain my emotion any further, I told him what happened with TJ and broke down in tears, a little heartbroken from living in such a lie. He turned around from his massage and sincerely paused for a second, thinking he was going to console me, but instead he laughed at the very prospect of my notion that monogamous relationships ever existed. Are you serious? He was only doing what every guy in the world does. You can't hold that against him. I replied in a light-hearted gesture. Whose side are you on, anyways? His answer stuck with me for many years to come. I'm on your side, which is why I'm going to save you a lot of grief with this one tip. Never expect a man to be faithful, and you'll never be let down. It's just the way us men are genetically imprinted. The remainder of the massage, I had to pretend like I wasn't further saddened by his response, when in fact having to act enlightened. I would never come to him for any other relationship advice, ever again. He told me I'd be fine if I just listened to my mentor. He still loved role-playing the teacher and me the pupil, like the old days before he got rich and only used to be a college professor. I finished the massage and fulfilled my sexual duties before being sent home, wanting to collapse in anguish. TJ was outside my apartment door when I got there, his mom waiting downstairs in her minivan just in case I kicked him out again. He pleaded his guilt and promised that he would never see her again, agreeing with me that she was the town slut and he screwed up big time. I let him back into my apartment and back into my life, for that matter, but more aware of the world I was being led into believing was of normal conduct accepted by everyone in this sick world. Jeffrey was going back to NYC and told me to have a few days off before his assistant at his office would arrange an e-ticket on a commercial flight for me to join him later in the week. I had just made loads of money from my previous trip and wanted to relax like any teenager does. So I threw a hotel party that weekend on Singer Island in Rivera Beach, inviting only a small group of friends to begin with. The hotel room quickly filled up with a flood of teens and the pumping music was blaring. The room had a balcony overlooking the pool and the beach that became the smoker section. Like always, right? I wasn't a real smoker at that point, preferring to have a puff of a spiffed blunt instead, so I made it my rule to go outside, trying to prevent holes in the carpet. But it didn't last too long when our forbidden walls came tumbling down, making so much money that I could supply my wild parties with an assortment of drugs like trips, ecstasy, and coke, as well as an abundance of alcohol that TJ had all contacts for, made all my fellow teens admire me. It definitely gave me a head swell. Thinking here, I was so young but so grown up already, with all my peers from high school looking up to me. In the wee hours of the morning, we were still going hard. Excuse me. With our pupils dilated into little black diamonds. I don't think she means dilated. We were all having in-depth conversations about life and where we would all end up when this charade was all done. Nobody got to sleep that night as the room slowly dwindled in numbers as people were finding their way home to recover from the repercussions of drugs wearing down out of their intoxicated system. When I flew out to NYC to meet Jeffrey the next day, I was still in a horrible state. Not knowing what was wrong with me, thinking it was just a bad come down, I rushed out of the elevator and down the hall to my room, sweating profusely to make it just in time to the toilet to throw up bile again for the uncountable time since getting off the plane. I was having intense cramps in my stomach, and when I was called down to meet Jeffrey in the massage room, I had to decline for the very first time. I told the housekeeper that I was feeling very ill after the flight, maybe some off food for lunch, and needed to lie down for a while. Nobody came up to check on me for hours or even call. Waking up from my much-needed nap, I pulled back the expensive white sheets to find myself in a pool of my own sweat and blood. I was covered in the red stains that drenched the pants I was wearing. I had no idea what was going on. I could only focus on the dire amount of pain I was in. In between the heaves of throwing up and crying simultaneously, I was able to reach the phone and call the housemaid on the intercom. I told her I needed to go to the hospital immediately and slammed the phone down, only to fall back to the floor, hurtle in a ball. She didn't hesitate in calling Ghislaine, who ran up to see what was wrong. Ghislaine called Jeffrey, who was in his office at the time, and told him to hurry up to my level, stressing to him that it was an emergency. Thinking they really cared about me for the first time since I'd known them, they came with me to the hospital. They came to the hospital with me. Now I realized I was only a liability in getting them caught, and they needed to get to the doctors before I could say anything incriminating. They were suspecting the worst now, and seeing he never wore a condom with me, and from our previous conversations, they knew I always made TJ wear one. They feared the situation at hand. When he saw the catastrophic state I was in at that point, it was the housemaid who helped me get up and assisted me down to the car where Jojo was waiting for me. He drove us to either Lenox Hill Hospital or Mount Sinai. I can't remember, as it was so blurry and such a bad condition. Rushed in for immediate testing, I was uncontrollably vomiting and in so much agony. I was given an injection to help me subside the intense pain. A nurse came in to ask who would pay for this, and although I insisted my parents' insurance bill covered me, Jeffrey persisted that he take care of all the medical bills and gave the nurse his information. When the pain relief kicked in, everything and everyone dwindled away until I felt like Alice in Wonderland, who just swallowed the shrinking tablet, and everyone standing around me seemed to move so quick, speak so loud, and hover above me. When I woke from my induced state, I was alone in a different room, not knowing at all what went on, but feeling a little better. I called in the nurse, who looked through my charts and checked my vitals. They told me the doctor would be in shortly to inform me of the conclusion to my illness. He was a tall man with dark hair and a hardened look about him, obviously from his job and constantly seeing the worst horror stories man could think of. He just bluntly told me I had miscarried in early stages of pregnancy. I should be fine to go home as soon as my course of intravenous antibiotics was complete. The news sunk in fast and hit a deep nerve. I waited for the doctor to close the curtain before I let out any emotion, and cried for my disastrous lifestyle that was dragging me into a world that I wanted to break out of. This recurring cycle of believing I needed men like Jeffrey to succeed in my life was draining the last bits of sensitivity left in my heart. I was picked up by Jeffrey himself, who took the doctor alone to the side of the busy hallway to have a private conversation about something. Jeffrey wasn't comforting at all. Instead, he sent me back home to rest for a couple weeks, and I only fell deeper into a depression, using all forms of self-medication to treat my sorrows. 2 weeks later, as if Jeffrey was trying to lighten my spirits, he told me I would be going to his island to meet a new client. He is a Harvard professor named Stephen. I would be spending 2 days with him, showing him around the island, dining with him, and treating him to a massage whenever he wanted. Without Jeffrey even verbalizing the need to have sex with him, he told me to keep him happy like I had my first client. I packed my suitcase with island apparel and kissed TJ goodbye, who had at least offered me a warm embrace upon the news of my miscarriage, but none other than that, knowing it wasn't his. Stephen was a quirky little man with white hair and a mad scientist look about him. We arrived separately, and I greeted him when one of the housekeepers picked him up from the airport and arrived by boat, instead of helicopter, as Jeffrey and Ghislaine often arrive on. We made our acquaintances, and he looked as if he was tripping over himself with words, obviously delighted with his company and location for the weekend. I showed him around as Jeffrey had asked and took him on an adventurous quad bike ride around the small curvy paths, leading the way and letting loose my hair, doing something that gave me a natural high instead of the prescription one. The, the sights alone were breathtaking. From the mountainous peaks of the untouched parts of the island, we sat at a cliff and just sat there, not saying a word to each other, besides compliment the sights Mother Nature had appealed to us. I didn't feel as if I owed this stranger anything but was expected of me by Jeffrey, and I could be polite. I just couldn't be myself. We got back to the main villa to see what time dinner would be served, so we could have time to unpack and clean up beforehand. We both met at 6 p.m. for dinner on the outside veranda. He sat at the head of the table, and I sat next to him, politely folding my napkin to put in my lap. The first time Jeffrey and Ghislaine had seen me cut meat and eat with a fork and knife, they were so appalled, making fun of my unsophisticated habits. Ghislaine took the fork and knife in her hands and proceeded to show me how to politely cut my food and eat. Now that my mannerisms had improved, they wouldn't have to be worried about my etiquette when someone important was around anyway. We both drank the red wine supplied in the table, and it seemed to warm me up on the breezy night. By the time dinner was served and another red wine bottle later, he seemed to get funnier. I made fun of his tousled hair, and he poked at me from his skinny legs, calling me a wannabe anorexic. When dessert was brought out, he asked if he could receive one of the delightful massages he had been hearing about from Jeffrey. I gulped more red wine down and sweetly complied with his offer, dreading the moment I'd have to see his naked body, let alone touch it. I asked the housekeeper, Kathy, that had been serving us the night, to please have someone set up a massage bed in one of the cabanas. I went to my room to down a few Xanax, telling him I wanted to freshen up after dinner, but to meet me in his cabana in 20 minutes or so. I was ready to go, as I said. 20 minutes later, with the effects of the tablets mixed with the red wine, and I would be free not to feel anything. He was still dressed when I got to the cabana, obviously not accustomed to this and a lot shyer than what I had been used to. I told him he needed to undress and lie face down on the table, putting a towel to cover his bare bottom and prevent him feeling embarrassed during the massage. I gave the massage my earnest, as I always had, and quickly got through having intercourse with him, not wanting to make any foreplay or anything extravagant of it. I let him think that that's as good as it got, and by the smile on his face, I thought I'd done enough. The next day, I took him down to the beach for a real massage under a tiki hut on the water's edge. It was one of Jeffrey's favorite places to have a massage, as he droned out the sound of the waves and my gentle therapeutic strokes. Afterwards, we had lunch back at the main villa and went back down to the beach to swim out to the water trampoline, about 100 meters off the dock. He didn't do any bouncing around or anything like that. It was just a good base point for a rest spot after a long swim. What was really cool, though, was we could see through the mesh and watch fish swimming underneath. The rest of the afternoon we spent by the pool reading magazines and eating fruit plates. Eventually, he went to his cabana to have a nap later on. That night after dinner, and my mixed cocktail of Xanax and red wine, I'd asked if he'd like another massage before I went to bed. He just wanted to stay up watching movies in Jeffrey's theater room. Excuse me. As peculiar as that request was to me, I didn't argue it. I just hope I hadn't disappointed him in any way that I could make it back to Jeffrey. I showed him how to use the remote and turn off the TV when he was finished before going to bed. The next morning, we were both catching a flight from St. Thomas, and we had no time for anything other than breakfast and packing, which saved me from having to be too polite as we said our goodbyes from the terminal in the airport, both hurriedly off in separate directions, thankfully. I arrived back in Palm Beach, only to be told to catch another flight the next day to New York City, where Jeffrey would fix me up the money he owed me for treating his colleagues out to an entertaining weekend. End of chapter 9. Wow, that was a action-packed and juicy chapter. My goodness. Whew. Okay, I think I'm going to call it for this session. I actually might do another one later tonight if anybody is up. Otherwise, you can definitely catch it tomorrow. I just want to look at the comments. This all sounds like a bad porno word. Yeah, I think you're right on that one, Melissa. Rockshot, how's it going? Pamela, my young Latin lover boy. Oh, thanks, Pamela. That's quite the compliment. I feel violated from listening to this evil crap. I hope they get what's coming to them. Babito. Yeah, Matt Groening's crusty feet. Hello, Heather. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. If anybody would like to subscribe, it's free to do so. It's in the bottom right corner. Thanks for tuning in, Victoria. And all of my content uncensored is on BNT, brand YouTube, because there are a couple George Webb interviews and a John Wedger interview and a couple other videos that have been removed. So all of my content is on brand YouTube. So if you want to give me a subscription on there, they actually made me a Rhodium account, which is one of the premium accounts on there, along with guys like Sean and Ryan, Sonia, Miss Breeze, that crowd. So I feel quite lucky and grateful to them for designating me that. If you want to support the channel with a donation, please feel free to do that. There is links in the description box to my Patreon, PayPal, GoFundMe. You can do Patreon for as little as $1, $2, or you can do a larger amount if you like as well. Also, if you have other socials, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, also in the description box as well. So I'll probably do another session later tonight. How do I subscribe? So it should be in the bottom right corner. Victoria? Did you apologize to Rye yet? About what, Rockshot? Did I hurt his feelings? I hope not. I don't know. I think his skin's a little thicker than that. But yeah, brand new tube, guys. It's the future. No censorship over there on BNT. So go ahead and give me a sub. Check out my vids on there. Okay, I'm gonna get a snack and do some emails and other stuff, and I'll probably do one more session later tonight for chapter 10. That was definitely the juiciest 2 chapters I think that I've read so far from Miss Roberts' prose. Yeah, if you want to check it out, go ahead and read it. I don't think I should apologize for saying someone's wrong, Rockshot. But if you are interested, me and Rye are actually going to debate that topic next time we get a chance to chat. So we'll be on the lookout for that, because I know he's looking for that as well. He doesn't shy away from intellectual sparring, and I'm looking forward to that next time I talk to Mr. Dawson. So cheers, all the best from the Midwest. This is the Lonely Ronin, Adakin, Addy Ads. Until next time, people, stay frosty.